Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Breaking the Game, podcast presented by Premier Spike, which is the best round net equipment in our sport. You can actually use code ROSE, so just my last name, at checkout to get 2 additional Premier Spike balls, with just bigger ball being a thing in 2025. The Premier Spike League being announced in the last week. Definitely get yourself some Premier Spike balls, boil them, make them a bit bigger, start practicing because I think that league's really exciting, and we won't spend much time talking about that on this episode. I want to kind of dive into everything regarding 2025 tournaments and what's looking ahead on the next episode. But I just got back from Orlando for the ASL Playoffs and wanted to just recap everything that happened this weekend. It was an awesome event, so huge props to Alex and Caleb and everyone involved with running it. I want to talk through what happened, so just like the results. Also talk through my day and everything that went on with the Lemon Lads. And then also just spend some time on talking about, the good, the bad, everything in between. Just my take on squad tournaments in general, and I'll share all that. So yeah, I just got back from Orlando. It was actually a really nice day on Saturday. Friday it was very hot. I get overheated very easily, so 85 and sunny is pushing it for me. But on Saturday it was like 75, and it was just cloudy and perfect round net conditions, honestly. So I felt like I played a lot better day two. Whereas with day one, I was really trying to get back into the groove of things. Wasn't playing my best. Felt like I was a little rushed. I hadn't played much in the off season, just with it being freezing cold in New York City, and just been kind of grinding in the gym a lot more, which I definitely noticed an improvement in my conditioning, and that was nice to see. But I was definitely shaking off the rust a bit day one, so my teammates probably noticed that, and I was glad to kind of turn it around and be a lot better day two. Go on a deep bracket run with them. So we'll get to all of that. I actually got home and saw that the co-ed championship trophy got delivered, which is awesome. So Chalk, shout out Katie, Pack, Kathleen, and Trip for kind of putting this together. Was great to come home to, and yeah, something to commemorate our trip on, or just the whole last season. And there's no more STS, so that's another thing that's pretty crazy. We were the last co-ed champions of the Spikeball Tour Series. There's definitely going to be more championships, of course, in the sport as it transitions towards USA Round Net, other orgs leading events. We have Premier Spike now coming out with a tour series, like I mentioned. We'll get into all that at a later time, but instead, for now, let's talk through ASL. So just a bit of a recap, starting with just the Lemon Lads and myself. We went 34 out of 35 in terms of games won, day one. Thought that maybe would have been enough to get us the 1 seed, but it wasn't. Montreal and Etienne and Vinny and all those guys, they went undefeated, so they got the 1 seed going into day two. That meant that Livonia and ourselves were on the same side of the bracket. We were hoping that we could get the 1 seed and kind of pin them together on the other side, but it didn't happen. So we had to beat, if we were going to win, we had to beat the last year's champions, as well as sort of everyone's favorite going into the tournament in Quebec. So or Montreal rather, but it was it was a good Saturday. Sorry, good Friday. Going into Saturday, we all felt really good going into the bracket play, and I hadn't actually got a chance to play with everyone the first day. I hadn't played with Mike or Gabe at all. So day two, it was sort of like, we want to focus on our best lineups, but I also wanted a chance to play with Gabe and with Mike. Didn't actually get a chance to ever play with Mike just because we were both sort of the serve heavy players on our squad. So it made more sense to match up Mike with someone like Matt or Jake or Dan and myself the same way. It meant, more sense to match me up with someone like Matt or Dan. So pretty much anytime we had the chance, we were running the lineup of myself and Dan, and we had a lot of success. Dan and I played a tournament with him previously in Dallas last year, and he's a really great player. Great instincts on defense. I think I was definitely learning a lot from him on defense. I didn't feel like my defense was too great this weekend. I felt like my serve receive was a lot better, and I think part of that was just like being more athletic, being more explosive on lateral movement, and getting to wider serves. Also, being more comfortable standing further back on servers that hit the ball really hard was important for me. Like in the past, I've been constantly wrecked by players like Ben Goldfarb, Caleb Cummings, people that just hit the ball really, really hard at me. So I was, having more conscious decision of just being further back, and I still felt comfortable enough to reach the wide ones that they did hit. So it was good to see that improvement for myself. Going into later stages of bracket, we matched up actually with Florida and Ben in the quarterfinals and had a doozy of a series with them. We actually started down 3-0 in the first round, so dug ourselves a big hole. We took it 2-1 in the second round and then 2-1 in the third round. So we were down 5-4 going into the final round, meaning that if we were going to win, we had to at least win 2 nets of the 3. And if we won all 3 nets, we won the series outright. So, and we wouldn't have to force overtime. So that's exactly what we did. We reverse swept, beat them 3-0 in the final round with some really outstanding performances from Mike, Matt, Gabe, Tommy too. I didn't really get to watch too much of Tommy's game as well, but really from everyone that I saw play outstanding in that series, especially in the last round. It was really a great atmosphere. Like I'll speak more about just the environment of squads and how much I like squad tournaments, but yeah, it was great to be a part of. And you had the overtime going on in the background between Cal Poly and Northeastern, so that was really cool to see. And it was just great, like being a part of like something like that where you're playing for so much and so much on the line. Last year, our Atlanta squad didn't make it to the top bracket, so I was playing consolation on day 2, and yeah, it was just great to be back in a winning environment. So after we won that series, we ended up playing Livonia in the semifinals. I really feel like I stepped up my game in this series. I was matched up against Thomas and Jack in the first game, playing with Dan, and received Thomas really well. In the past, like, I bit a lot on his fakes. I was being really patient, and yeah, just letting the serve kind of come to me. So I was happy with how I played Thomas in the first game, and then I had the chance to decide to play him when we were matching in the second round. Just given how our success was in the first round, we actually took 2 out of 3 in the first round against them. So I was feeling good. Matched myself up against Thomas again, and this time it was me and Matt playing him and Henry. And another, pretty good game. I actually got aced by Thomas once in this game, but given that I only got aced once in 2 games playing Thomas, it felt pretty good. And so I was feeling really good about our squad's chances to beat Livonia after 2 rounds. We took 2 out of 3 nets in the second round as well, so we were going up 4-2 into the third round. And then we got swept in the third round. They were matching us, so Marino and J Bar matched themselves up against Dan and I. And yeah, we got off to a really slow start in that game. Props to them. They were, the cleaner team. Marino put some pressure on us early. It's definitely weirder playing Marino than Thomas for me specifically. I think Marino goes for like the wider angles and there's more of a threat there, whereas Thomas hits it a little bit harder. So I think, sometimes like there's certain days where a certain player or like between them, one feels a little easier than the other to receive. And for whatever reason, that day it was Thomas for me and was struggling more with Marino. Other days it's been the opposite. I mean, they're a really tough duo, of course, to receive. So um, we we fell down 5-4 going into the third round, and then it was sort of on us. We had to win 2 out of 3, like our situation with Florida in the quarters. So um, we ended up matching myself and Jake up against Henry and Henry and Jack, and the reason we kind of matched up ourselves in that manner was we felt that because Rogue had put themselves together and they were trying to secure at least one win to force overtime, we thought it would be a bad idea to put Gabe and I on that net, risking that if we had lost, we didn't have another serve heavy player on a different net that was going to win. So we split us up. We put Matt and Gabe together. They beat Rogue, so that was huge. I didn't get to watch any of it, but I kept hearing in the background Gabe and Matt like cheering a bunch. So that was keeping my energy up. And then um, Mike and Dan had lost to Emerson and spacing on who the other player. It might have been J Bar in that matchup, or um, I think it was J Bar, but they had lost that game, and now it was on us. We were down 6-5. We were in extras versus Henry and Jack. Um, got a couple back-to-back touches and went for us. So we were on to overtime. Um, and this was the first time that I participated in the squad overtime. It's a weird format. I'll be honest. I have more that I want to touch upon the overtime, but long story short, we lost 5-1. It felt pretty quick. We were out of the tournament. We had played Livonia pretty well up until that point. Just started down pretty quickly in that overtime, and that's that. Our tournament life was over. We were competing for third. It was pretty sad, but it is what it is. It was a great run, and we ended up beating Cali in the third place match. I was really happy that it was only 2 rounds instead of 4. So we only did that. I think that might have just been like a time savings thing from that standpoint. But yeah, that was sort of the Lemon Lads day. It was about a blast playing with all them. Um, and can't wait for the next ASL tournament whenever there is one. And in the future, it's probably going to be the Pro League, which had been announced prior to the tournament at the owners retreat. Lots more info coming on that soon. But yeah, I think it's just an exciting time in round net that we have squad tournaments. I've never been in the college round net scene, so having a chance to be a part of the squad format it's honestly probably my favorite round net archetype of tournament. So really want a chance to play in more of those, and really think that that's the future of the sport. But other things in terms of the tournament that I wanted to touch on. So going into the tournament, I talked about it on the podcast a bit, but Canada had never won one of these big events. They got second at the last ASL tournament. They got second at the last 2 World Championships. This was Canada's time, and I wanted them to do it. Part of me also wanted to see Livonia win because they beat us, and I just wanted to see whoever beat us win. But it was sweet. I didn't really care who won the finals. I was just kind of watching and hoping for great round net. That's exactly what we got. Ended up going to overtime. Livonia swept them in the final round after they were down 6-3, headed into that final round. So that was extremely exciting. Thomas aced out to force overtime. And then they go into overtime, which I was sort of expecting, just because we had played them in the semifinals and just had the overtime, that it would just be 8 points. Turns out it was a full game 21. which is great. I'm happy that Caleb and Alex made that decision to change the rules. I think it's definitely tough because we wanted to play a full game of course too, Gabe and I, when we were playing Rogue in the semis. But I do think it was the right decision just to switch it. It's it's hard in those moments to know what the best decision is, but I think trying to explain everything to the crowd at the time might have been pretty difficult to pull off. And we'd just seen in the semis, sort of like an underwhelming, if you would, result. Not that it was underwhelming for Livonia by any sense. It's more so that it was kind of hard to follow from like a viewership perspective. And obviously we lost, so that wasn't great. But I think even if we had won, like it just wasn't a great format. And this is my opinion. Props to Alex and Caleb for trying something new, but didn't love the rules. And that's that. I think I'm glad that they fixed it, or they changed it for the last one. And I'm sure they'll continue to gather community feedback and see ways that they can make overtime more exciting in the future, whether it is just, game to 21. So that's what they did. We saw Vinny and Etienne take on Rogue. And funny enough, Marino actually started the game out really hot. I think they went up 3-1 or 4-1. So maybe if it was the overtime rules, they would have won. But Montreal, they battled back. They made some really crazy conversions, some great receives. It was really awesome to see. I mean, Etienne, who I've been a big fan of, just watching his game throughout the years, like he's had a lot of special moments, but I think this was probably the biggest one that I've seen from him, and it was just great to see Vinny perform in that moment too. He's gotten a lot of second places over the years, and it was special. It was pretty legendary. It was great to see as just a fan of the game as well. So I'm glad that the tournament ended that way. Regardless of who won, we got really close overtime game. The whole round net world watching, it was sweet, and yeah, I think it just capped off a really great weekend of round net. The other thing I want to touch on a little bit is the women's division, which I didn't get a chance to watch too much of. Um, but I did see that Quebec ended up taking on Cali in the finals. So I'll admit I was wrong about Quebec. Going into the tournament, if you watched the previous episode of the podcast, I spoke about that I thought it was a two-team race between Cali and Rochester, and I was wrong. Quebec beat Rochester in the semis. Um, and so Rochester ended up getting third, so kind of half right on my prediction there. But Quebec came to play. They had a lot of experience. They seemed super clean from the little bits that I got to see. And Cali ended up winning it in a landslide in the finals, which wasn't too surprising. I think it would have been really hard for any of the women's teams to pull off that upset. So great win, Cali. They didn't win it last year. They came back, redeemed themselves. Great to see, have some friends on that team. So that was exciting, and good for them. Now I want to talk about the good of the tournament, and a little bit of the bad too. But we'll start with the good. So for one, the fields were way better than last year. I mean, we all went into the tournament last year not really knowing what to expect. Had a ton of sand all over the place on the field. This year we got turf, which is really, everything that I can ask for when I'm a player paying a lot of money. I want a consistent playing surface. That was great to play on. And funny enough, I actually got really bad turf burn within the first game or two of day one. So my whole weekend, I was maybe 3 to 5% less mobile than I could have been. So that was just kind of staying on the weekend for me. Was I got injured early on day one and had to kind of play through it, which adrenaline did get me through most of it, but definitely struggling with it now. I won't show you, but it's pretty bad, right on the back of my ass. So. Yeah, not too fun there, but yeah, that was the good. I think um, it's great that we had turf, and hopefully the future tournaments are also on turf for these types of big events. And the other thing is, I mean, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think this really solidified in my mind that squad events are the future of the sport. It really takes growing communities and building up like the younger players within our sport, the less experienced ones to grow. And I think squads are a great way to do that. You get people invested in something bigger. Um, you get people that can watch. You get all the excitement of like when your net's finished or your net's finished, you get to watch the rest of the squad play. Um, I think the squad versus squad environment is just such a blast, and everyone I've spoken to about it loved the format. If it was their first time playing, if it was their second time playing, they thought it was even better than last year. Um, and then the last thing is the finals. I mean, just had mentioned it, but was a terrific way to cap off the tournament. And yeah, was just awesome seeing Etienne play the way that he had, and he won MVP. So that was all the good. The bad, I think there's a lot to kind of dive into here for me. Try to take some notes on it throughout the weekend because there's some things that came up and wanted to touch on them. I think everyone kind of has different thoughts here, and a lot of this might be, my personal opinion, of course. So don't be too stuck on it. But one thing that I didn't love was the elongated pool play. Now, this is talking more specifically for women's. It was a bit different for the open or the men's division, just that we had an even six pools of six, so 36 teams, and it was split out really nicely. We played 10 games on the day, so two rounds versus each team and five matchups. But with the women's division, there were 15 teams, and it was decided that it was going to be split into a pool of seven and a pool of eight, which meant that the timing was completely off in both of those pools. You also had the pool of eight play seven matchups and 14 games total, which is insane to me for day one of a tournament. I understand you want to pay for the games that you play, and I get that side of it, but I also think that we need to consider just the amount of strain that puts on people's bodies. Um, I was hanging out to watch like the women's division at the end of day one, and people looked gassed. I mean, they were out in the sun all day, and maybe that had somewhat to do with it. But 14 games is a lot, especially when you're going right into bracket on day two at 8 a.m. and you're out at the field until 8:30. I understand that the app that was keeping track of just the whole matchups and everything online wasn't working too well at the beginning of the day, so everything got pushed back by an hour. But it did feel just extremely long for them, and by the time you leave the field at 8:30, you're having dinner at 9:30. And then you get home and you go to bed by 10:30, and you have to wake up at 6 to get to the field. So it's fast, especially if you're living further away at like an Airbnb. It comes on you fast in day two, and I much prefer smaller pool plays. I think this could have been resolved with just three pools of five for the 15 teams. Obviously, it's a numbers game, and it changes every tournament, so it's hard to know exactly what like the best decision is going to be. But to me, if I was playing in that division, I much would have preferred having maybe just three pools of five, playing four matchups, not feeling as rushed throughout the day, having a longer lunch, being able to watch other squads, being able to mingle. There's a lot that you can do. Whereas when you're playing seven different teams and 14 games, you are, for one, guaranteeing that you're pushing late into the day. And number two, you don't have a lot of time to meander and get lunch and take breaks and everything that is pre-required for playing your best throughout the day. So I think that's pretty hard, but it is what it is. And then the second thing I wanted to touch on was just consolation. Now, I've had lots of discussions about this in the past with the likes of Ben Dantowitz and other community members that have very strong beliefs about consolation and how great it is for the sport. Now, I personally don't share those thoughts. I am not a big fan of consolation. I think one of the things that the pro league is going to be pushing really hard for is having more fans at at events and having more supporters, which is really what you have in squad events. Your best supporters are your own teammates, but once those teams are eliminated and you're late in the day on day two, those are a lot of the best fans that we can have in the sport are the teams that had been eliminated. So I think it's a little contradictory to require teams or require but make teams play out and guarantee money to those divisions. For example, like in Premier, if you don't make the top 16, you can play out in the B bracket for prize money on day two. Now, I understand that you travel really far for the event to play consolation, and maybe there should be some sort of prize, like maybe your registration back or something. I just don't think there needs to be a big prize pool for B bracket. I think most of the money should go to the best teams uh, in the division, and I also think that like consolation and forcing people to play when they've already lost is sort of a weird idea. Like when I lose and I'm in B bracket, like I'm sorry, my energy is just not quite there. So I'd much rather watch other teams that are still in it and playing for more than play myself. I understand people if they have different opinions, but to me, having the crowd and being a part of the crowd is a lot more fun than playing. So or once I've lost. But that's just my thoughts. And then the last thing that was sort of hard to deal with, and I touched on it a little bit earlier, but the overtime rules, these were changed mid tournament, and I wasn't a huge fan of this. So going into the event, we knew the overtime rules. If you had kind of followed some posts on social media and had listened to some of the things that Alex and Caleb were preaching, like this was a big idea of theirs. I'm sure they wanted it to be really successful. And it could have been like I think it just wasn't a great semifinals overtime that myself was included in. So maybe that was a big reason on why it got changed in the finals. But um, I didn't love, and I'm just a big proponent of being consistent like the whole way. And so I didn't love that in semifinals it was this game to 5 points and 8 points played. And then in the overtime of the finals, it was a game to 21. Now, the likelihood of both those matchups going to overtime is pretty slim to begin with. So it's crazy we even had two overtimes in the semis and finals. But it happened, and this is what we have to talk about. So I wasn't a big fan of the overtime to begin with. I did like that they made the change because I think the overtime rules weren't great, but I just would have much rather played a game to 21 in the semifinals, considering we had played a really long series with Livonia and it was over, within a blink of an eye. So wasn't a huge fan of the consistency changing there. But I'm sure that that's one that Alex and Caleb will take away and figure out like the best decision moving forward. So overall, it was a great event. I know I preached a little bit about some things I didn't love there at the end of this, but did just want to be honest with you guys and share all my thoughts. So um, yeah, this has been episode 2 of the Breaking the Game podcast. We will be back next week. I'll plan to do an episode kind of talking a little bit more about some of the changes that we're seeing in 2025. We got the Premier Spike Tour series that's launching, and there's a lot to break down there. The Spikeball Tour series, they have backed out of the tournament scene and are just going to be a supporter for different government bodies. So I think that's the right decision. More I'll touch upon in the next episode, but that's been a crazy announcement that's materialized in the last couple of days. Um, and just a lot more to talk about with RoundNet and the rules and what's going to be a crazy 2025. So thanks for joining in. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon.